Take two with this piece of shit cunt computer. 2, 3, 4. Ba da ba 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 ba. Da da ba 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 ba. Yep, 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 yep. It's Wednesday. I'm sorry for using the word cunt. Hi. Picks up the week. Okay, so I was about halfway through this when the computer decided to just stop. Because I was touching the mouse or something. Oh, it even closed the. Good. Well, this thing. Certainly, my entire life doesn't revolve around this laptop, so that's not a worry. Okay. First up is Nightwing number 87. I don't normally buy Nightwing, but this particular issue. Sorry, I was just noticing something. Written by Tom Taylor, who I do enjoy his writing. He wrote Superior Iron Man, which I really loved, and he's written a couple other things that I like. He mostly writes DC, so I don't read as much stuff of his anymore. But and if you're not in the know, Nightwing is the original Robin, Dick Grayson. But sometime in I want to say it was the 80s, he quit being Robin and moved himself to Bloodhaven and became Nightwing, the protector of that particular city. And I've always liked the character. I've always enjoyed the character. In fact, I really like the fact that he went out on his own. I find that admirable. But the reason I bought this is because, and I don't want to give too much away, but as you can see, every page is a splash page, and there's no panels. They just have the characters moving thusly. It's really impressive. I didn't mention this in the first take of this, but this is my boss at the shop showed this to me, and I went, "Oh, well, I have to have that." And it was very reminiscent of Elena Casagrande's work. Elena Casagrande is the artist for the Black Widow book, and she doesn't do that for every page, but in every issue, there's a 2-page splash that does exactly that, where you'll see Natasha, like a bunch of different Natashas, you know what I mean? And I love it when she does it. So a whole issue of it, I'm on board for that as well. Even if I don't know what's going on in Nightwing these days, I don't care. That is something that as I've gotten older, that's been nice. Is like when I was young, I would read whatever comics you put in my hands, and then especially when I was in my 20s and working at the comic book store, I never needed to do that because it always drove me crazy that I couldn't read the whole thing. But that's the fun of collecting, is like you're driven to go out and get the issues you don't have, and then when you find it's a victory and your life has meaning for that brief moment. The only meaningful moments in my life come from comic books, and you may quote that. You may quote me on that. Don't tell my son or my girlfriend that, but they know. um, yeah. But then when I was working at a shop, and finally I didn't have to do that. I could pretty much get any series that I wanted, especially currently. So like, I mean, really from the past 20 years, I don't. There's few comics I don't own from the past 20 years that I want. Um, but I got very used to reading books that way, and I've since kind of been trying to not be so like I couldn't read a series until I had the entire series, which is just silly. So I'm not gonna, if an issue of Nightwing looks interesting to me, I'm not gonna be compelled to go read the previous 86 issues or even the previous 7 issues. I can just read one and be done with it. Because at this point, for one thing, my knowledge of superheroes is such that I know everything, and what I don't know, I can fill in the blanks. But also, it's just more fun this way. I'm not so, locked in, and I just, I'll read it from this or that. I mean, I like to read an arc, but I can also just read an issue or two. Great. Great insight, Jim. Also, this week I got King Conan #1. This is written by Jason Aaron and drawn by Mahmoud Asrar, who I think drew Jason Aaron's Conan the Barbarian arc, but let's make sure. So, if you're not hip to Conan, he was created by Robert E. Howard in the 1930s. Yeah, Mahmoud Asrar did draw Conan the Barbarian. Robert E. Howard in the 1930s as a pulp adventure character. Robert E. Howard eventually killed himself because life is meaningless and existence is a nightmare. But the characters obviously carried on. It was, popular enough in Weird Tales and stuff. I don't know because I like Conan and I'm familiar with the character and with a lot of the mythology around it, but I'm not hardcore. But I do know that the bulk of his adventures by Howard and others take place when he's in his prime, 20s, 30s, what have you. I mean, Conan's kind of always in his prime. But towards the end of his life, and I do believe this was a Robert Howard thing, he became king of Aquilonia and lived out his life as a king, a conqueror, which is, his destiny. And whether or not that's a Robert Howard thing is kind of irrelevant in this case, but because the comic books definitely went that way. Conan the Barbarian, Marvel Comics, Conan the Barbarian, as published by Marvel in the 1970s mostly. It went into the early 90s, but it was big in the 70s when Roy Thomas was writing it and Barry Windsor Smith was drawing it. Well, John Buscema also drew a big chunk of it, right? Yeah. And I don't think Romita. I want to say John Romita, but I'm not sure. John Buscema for sure, and Barry Smith for sure. And the book was so popular that he had a second book called King Conan or Conan the King. I can't remember which title came first. It went under both titles, also published by Marvel Comics. So even though he's older in those stories, he's no less Conan. He's a little more. I just recently the last Conan novel I read, which is one that I had read in 8th grade, takes place when he's king. And he's still an adventurer, and he still gets up to his old tricks. Still a bit of a barbarian, but anyway. The blurb here says Conan's last stand at the edge of the world. I feel like Jason Aaron is going to be writing the death of Conan in this story. I feel like he may not be the first. If he were to be the first to write the death of Conan, that would be pretty good. I would be on board for that because Jason Aaron has said that writing Conan is like a destiny of his. It's something he's been wanting to do his whole life. And I mean, just aside from the fact that he is himself rather a giant man, very sweet man, very soft spoken, but just a Viking of a dude. Huge beard. He shaves his head, and just a really big boy. But like I say, I've met him, and he was very nice, and I've seen him speak at panels and stuff. Very soft spoken. He's a very sweet boy. But he looks like a guy who would be really into Conan, and I have noticed that. I've noticed that like the nerdier guys that I know who are also bigger guys tend to and with that's a no brainer. It's the same way I relate to Wolverine more than most characters because he's a little guy. So yeah, I'm excited for this because I mean I really liked his Conan the Barbarian run, which also took place like over most of Conan's life. In fact, I think he dies in that. Now that I'm thinking about it, so that's the death of Conan. I can't remember. It was months ago. No, it was 2019 that series was out, and I read it and devoured it and enjoyed it. And then Jim Zub took over for Conan the Barbarian after him, and they even brought back Savage Sword of Conan, which was the title of a magazine featuring Conan the Barbarian. Conan was very big in the 70s and 80s. I keep forgetting that sort of. It is weird to think is absolutely nobody. Marvel stopped printing Conan comics in the 90s. I want to say Savage Sword of Conan went on a little bit longer because it was magazine size, it was black and white, it was a little more adult. So I think it had a little more staying power. But certainly by the late 90s, no more Conan. And then Dark Horse Comics took over that license because, to my knowledge, Conan is owned by the estate of Robert E. Howard, and as such is not. They license, obviously, they license the character out, and there have been just novels. I don't know if they're still publishing Conan novels, but yeah, I've read. Did I say this time or the last time that Did I say this time or last? The last Conan novel I read, in fact. Conan the Great. Conan the Great by Leonard Carpenter was the last Conan novel I read, and as I may or may not have said already, takes place when he's king, and that was from the '80s. I want to say. Fun fact: I didn't realize I bought it at a used bookstore like a couple years ago just for yucks. So I haven't read one of these in a while, and so I just grabbed the first one I saw, and then as I was reading it, I was like, I feel like I've read this before, and then I got to the sex scene or one of them anyway, and I went, oh right, I remember this giving me a boner at 13. I was like, oh yeah, okay, I have read this. Anyway, hopefully I already have a boner for this too. So ugh, gross. Finally, this week we have Avengers Forever #1, which I'm very excited for a couple of reasons. First of all, because this is the new Avengers title that spins out of the Avengers number 750 that came out a couple weeks ago and that I went on at length about here on this program. So I'm excited for that because that's going to be like an Exiles type title, which oddly enough I haven't. I own the entire run of Exiles, but I have not read it yet. But Exiles, and also when Greg Pak was writing Extreme X-Men a few years ago. Oh, and then there was a recent Exiles series, which I did read, uh, by Saladin Ahmed, which is weird because I love that book, but Ahmed's stuff I have not fallen in love with. He's been writing Miles Morales, Spider-Man, and Ms. Marvel for the last couple of years, and I still read them, but they don't. But his Exiles was great. So it's the Exiles were a super team of superheroes, a team of heroes, but they were all from different timelines, different dimensions, and so I like that. Like in Ahmed's Exiles, there was like a Ms. Marvel, but from post-apocalyptic timeline where she was middle-aged and bitter, um, stuff like that. Like that's the sort of thing that I'm into. So Avengers Forever is apparently, and the poster for Avengers Forever, which is the actual cover, not this cover, shows a bunch of. I think like the first in this issue, the first Avenger from a different dimension they meet is Tony Stark, the astonishing Ant-Man. So that'll be fun. But the other reason I'm excited is because this is also another beautiful Russell Dodderman variant cover. This one obviously featuring Wanda Maximoff, the Scarlet Witch. Um, I love this series of covers that Dodderman has been doing for the past few years. The first one he did was not a variant. I think it was just the A cover, and it was for an issue of X-Men, um, whatever the X-Men series before this current one, or is it two series back? But it was like issue 9 or 10. But it was Jean Grey, who is uh, my first and truest love. So, and as you can see, or maybe you can't, it's her in all her different costumes, and that's what all of these. So the Jean Grey one is her, a bunch of her in her, whatever different costumes. And boy, it was so nice that, and he made a print out of it and sold it on his Instagram, and which I bought immediately. And then he's done so. Like he did one for Storm, he did one for Psylocke, which I have that comic, Hellions #13. He did one for Storm. I said that already. He did one for Rogue. I'm pretty sure he did one for White Queen. And with Wanda here, that brings it to 6 by my count, and I think that's right. It's always a female X-Men, and it's always beautiful. And I was pestering him on Instagram, like, when are you going to make prints of the rest of these? I want a set. But apparently, he's only allowed to do, like, he hasn't gotten permission yet. And he was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to, which would really suck. But regardless, I just really like it. And it was honestly a bit of, I almost bought both because I do kind of want the A cover, but goddamn, this is so nice. I got to get that Jean Grey print up on my wall because this is blowjob Wanda. Everybody remember that from a few weeks ago? On a different picks of the week, now picks of last week, So I've been very busy. I was out of town for most of this week, and then I had to work a lot to make up for that lost time. So I haven't had much reading time, but I did read these. New Burn #2. This is only getting better. So, as I went on about the first issue, Newburn is an ex NYPD detective who is kind of given free reign by both the NYPD and by all the various organized crime families in New York. So when inter mob crime happens, the triads rob the Russians or the Jamaicans get into it with the Italians. Newburn is there to sort of, as he says in the first issue, he's like a UN moderator. So he has free reign, so to speak. And in the first issue, he met Emily here. Um, and in this issue, we see them interacting more. Emily was involved in a mafia related crime in the first issue. And Newburn has hired her to be like his new assistant. And so, yeah, it's really, I mean, it's such an incredible premise that I can't believe no one has thought of. And it's really great. Like, it's my favorite kind of private eye stuff is that strong silent type, and Newburn's definitely that. And then you have his assistant, who's more the more relatable point of view character. It's not, I mean, I don't want to say it's formulaic, but it is comforting that this is the sort of thing I can expect. But yeah, it's the interactions between them have been really great so far. And this second issue characterizes both of them way better than I've seen in a while. Like, I really feel like Zdarsky's on to something here. So yeah, gosh, I'm really hoping this book lasts a while. I don't see why it wouldn't. I also read last week Hulk #2. This was great. I even went back and read the first issue again to kind of get my bearings on it more. So, as I mentioned before, but I don't think I articulated very well, Bruce Banner has now control over the Hulk, which he, traditionally never had. So the Hulk, and he's sort of, it's a weird phrase, but he's turned the Hulk into a starship. So when he's on the inside, when we see him inside, it's like he's piloting a vessel, but it's really the Hulk. And that Hulk is not the dumb. He's huge and he's as strong as he ever is, but he has Bruce Banner's brain and diction. The Hulk Smash Hulk, the angry part of Hulk, the rage part, is what powers the starship. So he's got that Hulk like it's all inside of his head, right? But he's got him trapped in what he calls the engine room, and when he wants to add a little power, he just clicks it up. So in the first issue, we saw him fight infinite armies. In this second issue, he fights monsters, and then I believe in the I don't want to give it away, but the third. So every time he has to, every time Bruce nudges the engines up, the Hulk has to fight because the angrier Hulk gets, the stronger Hulk gets. So he has to throw angering things at him. So it was army soldiers, and then it was monsters, and then it was a very, I don't want to say, even though I'm very spoiler conscious these days because the new Spider-Man movie has been out for all of 5 days, and I thought without being on social media, I wouldn't need to worry about spoilers. No, damn girl at the bagel shop spoiled it. Card. I was like, hey, that's not true. She did give me a senior discount for no reason though. Not funny, even though it is a new bit of mine. So yeah, this Hulk has just been super good. It's not. I've been saying for months that I want Hulk Smash Hulk back, and I have gotten Hulk Smash Hulk, but it's not Leave Hulk Alone Hulk, which is kind of what I want more. It's now more Leave Banner Alone, which is good. But I also find, like, Immortal. One of the things about Immortal Hulk that was really made it such a horror book was that you saw what a horrible person Bruce Banner could be, and in this, we're not seeing any less of that. He's only getting more horrible, which will be. I mean, that obviously makes for good conflict and makes for good comics, but I want Leave Hulk Alone Hulk back. If I'm being honest, I read, like, it's been a couple of years now, but I read a ton of the Bill Mantlo run, which was in the '70s into the '80s. I want to say, yeah. Also, the run where Rocket Raccoon was first appeared, and that's my absolute all-time favorite Hulk. And I mean, I love like the Peter David Hulk, which was never really that. There's not a run. The Hulk's one of my favorite characters of all time. So any run on the Hulk, I'm I'm going to read at least. But yeah, Bill Mantlow's particular take on the character, which and it was also during the time that the TV show was on the air, so the book definitely kind of mirrors that, where Bruce Banner's just wandering and he's trying to stay hidden, but then the Hulk will come out and he has to deal with it. Which obviously, I don't think they don't really do that because it is the obvious thing. But I would really love if they brought back a Leave Hulk alone. I mean, when Bruce Jones was writing the Hulk in the early aughts, it had a very similar. I think it was pretty much that. And I want to say there's been at least one other run since then. Yeah, I want to say there's been at least a couple times where at the end of one writer's run, Bruce Banner starts hitchhiking, and I'm like, oh, good, we're getting back to that TV show thing. So, I mean, I did love the TV show growing up, although I haven't seen it in years and years and years. Anyway, that was Pixel last week, but up and up and up. All right, boy, I tell you, this has been a real pain in the ass this week, but everything's fine. Okay, as you were.